करो हाँ काटो हाँ weird.
ठीक है लाइव हो गया स्टार्ट
Hello dear friends, Assalamu alaikum and very good evening. Let us join us in this 11th session of the Discourse of History with Professor Dr. Aslam Sayyed Sahab. Since we were knocking around the theme of medieval Muslim history and historiography in our last session, and we had ended it up with the Umayyad dynasty and its rule mainly in Arab world. Today we were supposed to discuss and touch upon the Abbasid period, but having a number of demands and requests that we should also cover the Umayyad period in Spain and Africa. I consulted Sir Syed, and he agreed with the idea that, well, we should also cover this period with little more detail. So I triggered the debate with the very same question, sir, that how did the Umayyad rule ended up in Arabian Peninsula, and how did they manage to shift their crown from Arab to Europe, sir?
Yeah, your question, thank you, Dr. Saab. Your question is in two parts. First of all, what happened to their empire? Why were they defeated or replaced by the Abbasids? It was a huge insurrection, and its reasons are mostly political, tribal. Most important of all, the attitude that the Umayyads had adopted to the house of the Prophet, that people did not like, they detested it. So when Abu Muslim Khurasani raised his standard, black standard, that was the color of the Hashemite tribe. Their turbans or their cloaks, whatever they wore, it was black color. And Umayyads, just to oppose that, they had adopted white color. So from there you have this famous hadith also that black flags will be coming from Khurasan, and that will be the beginning of a new millennium or a new era in Muslim history. So that's when this hadith became very popular. So it was partly religious, partly it was because of the high-handedness of the Umayyads and the way they treated new Muslims, especially from the non-Arab world. That was, I think, the main cause of their downfall. So they were replaced by the Abbasids. And especially, this is very important to remember, at that time when they were gaining support of the population, they said, we will hand over the caliphate back to who deserves it. That is the house of the Prophet. That was the slogan that they used, and that triggered a lot of help, lot of support in different parts of the Muslim world, particularly in that part of the Muslim world which was non-Arab. So these are very briefly some of the reasons of their success. And what followed after that was, perhaps history has never seen that before or after, this revenge or retribution of the rulers, those who were alive, those who were dead, ruling dynasties of the Umayyads. Out of all that, a young prince by the name of Abdurrahman escaped to Spain. Now we have to keep in mind that Abbasid had swept only this Muslim part of the Middle East. Nothing had gone wrong with their household affairs in Spain. Spain was still under governorate of the Umayyads. So they were defeated in Damascus, but their rule was intact in the what we call later on as Iberian Peninsula. Now the question, two questions come. First of all, how did North Africa come under the Umayyads? And how did Spain come under the Umayyad rule. If you remember the history under the earlier caliphate, the rightly guided caliphate, Muslims had reached Egypt and a little beyond that. During the early Umayyad period, they had been quite active in the Mediterranean. They had occupied Cyprus and a few other islands. And gradually, they started making inroads towards the coasts of North Africa. Because North Africa, most of it is desert. But coastal areas are very important. So there was a navy headed by the Arabs, which they used, some armies they used, and they started invading these areas. Under Walid I, he appointed a brilliant general, Musa bin Nusayr. Musa bin Nusayr is credited with two things. One, with conquering all this area, all the way up to Morocco, even Spain, as we will see later. But he did another thing which is very important and which will have much lasting impact on our history and historiography, that he favored local tribes, local people, whom the English books call Berbers. They were not only converted to Islam, but they proved to be excellent strategists. And there were two main branches of this. One, who were nomads, mostly lived in deserts. Secondly, those who lived in the mountainous areas. Both were recruited by him, and they were responsible for much of the conquest that we come to know later. Now, coming to Spain, our historians become emotional that it was, our poets and everybody, they praise Tariq bin Ziyad, they praise Musa bin Nusayr. And when Musa bin Nusayr was finally demoted and every piece of land, property, whatever he owned was taken away from him, he was seen begging for food in the streets of Damascus. And some historians have reported that he would say that, could you give a loaf of bread to the conqueror of Spain and North Africa? That's a different story, very sad, but a different story. It is not as we are told in our history books that Spain just fell. Tariq bin Ziyad landed in what is today Gibraltar, and he burnt the boats, and then it was no end to it until they were stopped by the French. That's not true. That's not the whole story. The whole story is that there were problems within Spain at that time between the local population or local nobility and the Visigoths, who were the imposed rulers. There was a lot of gap between these two. Heavy taxation and so many other aspects of life, they had become so miserable that some nobles of Spain invited Muslims. And don't think it's far-fetched. I visited Wittenberg and I saw a small note by Martin Luther about Turks, about Muslims, in which he had warned that if we will not be kind to our farmers, they will invite Turks, because Turks are better in governing. They don't tax people a lot. There will be no religious tax, because they can stay as non-Muslims and still have to pay a very minor tax. These are some of the issues we have to keep in mind, that they knew because of this constant inflow and outflow between Spain and North Africa. They had seen the governance of these people. So they invited them against Visigoths. That's why Musa bin Nusayr then sent not an Arab, a Berber, Tariq bin Ziyad. He landed and he marched. Later on, of course, Musa also joined him. And that is the beginning of the establishment of this, what we call today as Muslim Spain. So it started in 711, and for the next 45 years or 46 years, it remained a part of Umayyad Empire. What they did was an amazing mixture of the Berbers and the Arabs. They also made pacts with the local population, with the local nobility. They did not impose their religion. And there are a few other things which we often miss. That was, they received a strong support from the Jewish population. You know, the Sephardic Jews who lived in Spain, they were discriminated against. They were not happy. And they were very happy when Muslims conquered, and they offered them all the help that they could. So it was the result of all these things. Christians also realized that they were not forced to conversion, and they were free from paying so many taxes. So they were also happy. And the third element, which is we often forget, is the people who worked as laborers who did not own anything. They are, in European history, they are called serfs. Large number of them, they converted to Islam, and they gained the same status as the status of a ruling family. So these are some of the features. Very briefly, I have mentioned them. Otherwise, each one deserves a full lecture. These were some of the features that helped established Umayyad rule in Spain. Then we have this, even in the expansion, they cooperated and collaborated with the local rulers. And after 756, another dimension will begin, which we will talk about later. So this is the answer to your questions.
Sir, thank you very much, sir. In light of this whole scenario, I would like to know what basically was their contribution in Europe. I mean, the institutions which they established.
Yes, it's amazing. Actually, it's very difficult to compare this phase of Spain with any other period for many reasons. And even if we don't believe the Arab historians who chronicle these things, we have plenty of material written by Europeans on this issue. Many a times, Pope did not understand what was going on. So he would send people to report. So I came across with the report of two sisters who came and visited Spain. And they glorified that, if you really want to live, you want to know how the life should be lived, you should visit Spain. The idea of a city, how a city should be developed, paved streets, access to hot water, access to different modes of production, access to market, educational institutions, street lights at night. All these things are mentioned by these travelers who were curious that what are these Muslims whose religion they did not like, but somehow or the other, and this is again a contradiction not only in our historiography, in European historiography. I'll give you example of two leaders in this regard. One is Reinhard Dozy, and the other is Levi Provincial. Dozy concentrates on the cultural, economic, and social aspects of Muslim Spain. He doesn't even talk about whether it was Islam or Christianity or any other religion that was imposed. He talks about that grand culture that developed in Muslim Spain. On the other hand, this French author, Levi Provincial, he concentrates on religion. So you have this contradictory thesis: accept Muslim culture, reject Muslim religion. So far as Islam is concerned, reject it. And later on, we will see there were many movements deliberately carried out to defame the Prophet, or in the streets they used to curse the Prophet of Islam. And the Arabs did not know what to do, how to handle that. You know, they had no idea of what we call today as blasphemy laws. So there are many good books. One is, I think, Wolf's book, Christian Martyrs in Muslim Spain, that talks about a priest by the name of Ulugius, who used to gather his followers, go in the streets of different cities of Spain, and would openly curse the Prophet of Islam, peace be upon him. And when they were arrested, they were asked, why are you doing it? They thought they were sick, and they asked them either to retreat what they had said, or if they need any medical help, it will be given. But after much debate, then they decided, okay, then we will kill you. Your death penalty will be given to you if you insist on that. So after a few killings, then they stopped doing it. So I'm giving you just an example that it was amazingly perplexing for many of them, that we have not seen anything like that before in any part of the known world. Then we have letters. John of Scotland, I think was his name, who came to study in Spain. And when he came to study in Spain, he had to know Arabic in order to understand what was being given in instructions. He became so fluent that he wrote a letter to his father in Arabic. His father knew Arabic. His father said, I'm very proud to know that you have become so fluent in Arabic, but don't go beyond that. Don't become a Muslim. So far as your fascination with the Arabic language and Arabic culture is concerned, I appreciate that, but don't take the next step. So we have, most of these are written in Europe, preserved in different European archives. And there are plenty of books I can count, but if there are any questions, I will give their names also on this issue. So this is one thing that we know, what Muslims gave to Europe, whether it was accepted or not. When an edict was issued to burn Muslim books, I have seen those places in Spain where books were burned. The local population, Christian population, protested. They said most of these books are on medicine, mathematics, agriculture, industry. Why are we depriving our people of this? They have been translated into Latin, they have been translated into Hebrew, and so why should we do this? So then the order came from Rome, okay, keep those books, but burn all the religious books. Burn the Quran and Hadith and all those, but keep these books you think are useful, and we will keep teaching them to our students. So these two contradictory approaches we have seen by Europeans, and these have been going on ever since. Even today, if you look at biases of Europeans, whether they are making cartoons, it is the Prophet of Islam, it is Islam as a religion that they cannot stand. On the contrary, the contribution of Muslims to various fields of knowledge, whether it is science or it's medicine or it's architecture or it's any skill from carpet weaving to you name it, agriculture. I mean, the revolution that Muslims brought in agriculture in Spain still says a lot even today if you visit Spain and ask them, where did this plant come from? Where did this plant come from? And they will tell you, and they will show you those towns from where it started and who brought them. Most of the agricultural products which Spain exports proudly to different European countries, they were introduced by the Arabs in Spain. In addition to that, I don't think that was ever transmitted. The way of thinking that Muslims gave to Europe. So many historians who are fair, who are not prejudiced, they say that actually the Renaissance that we talk about is the second Renaissance. The first Renaissance took place during this period. And that was the period revival of knowledge. Europeans did not know who Aristotle was. Europeans did not know even their own intellectual heritage. Muslim philosophers like Ibn Rushd, they revived these things. And so much so that many of the books of these Greek philosophers, they were translated from Arabic into Latin because the originals they could not find. So I would say, to briefly summarize my impressions of what Muslims gave to Europe through Spain, the way to live life. In medicine, people should be treated who are sick, not abandoned. How to treat human body, how to use water for agriculture through wells, through other irrigation systems, how to think logically, and how to appreciate philosophy or those writings which apparently I am using word, contradict religion. And the reaction in Europe was not very positive. The first step that France took was at the university that they banned the writings of Ibn Rushd. In other areas, they banned the writings of different people who touched these questions of free will of mankind. And I can give you thousands of examples in which two groups of Christian scholars are debating. One is using the argument of Ibn Sina, the other is using the argument of Ibn Rushd. Apparently, their writings were known to them through translations or through debates that used to take place. Then, what today we call as music, especially in churches and music competitions, they were also a gift of Spanish people, Spanish Muslims to Europe. Competitions were held between different singers, instrumentalists. We have some paintings and some engravings. If you visit different parts of Spain, you will see that at this place, this musical competition was held. And this chorus, the idea of chorus that so many people get together, or as they called in churches, Christmas carols, they begin from the fact that when Muslims started celebrating the Prophet's birthday in groups, they were copied by many people in Europe. Instruments, many instruments. Some people say that even these piano, guitar, all these were the instruments that traveled from east to west. Percussion instruments especially, they also were introduced by the people, because this instrument that we know as tabla, in Arabic it was tabal, it was the drum that's beaten to start a war or warning the people about any hazard or about any eventuality that they are going to face soon. these were imported and used extensively by people. One of my German colleagues who has written extensively on this believes that piano is actually an amendment of an Iranian instrument. The same thing. It is much smaller in size, but it has the same technique. I am not an expert on music, so I cannot verify whether that is true or not. But what Muslims gave to Europe, I have covered only a very small part. I have not talked about literature. Muslims gave them literature. Later on, all these fairy tales, all these ideas for which Europeans became known, whether they were Chaucer's tales or whether they were these two brothers in Europe, their tales, they were all taken from 1001 Nights. This book became so popular that its translations and its many editions were available in Europe at that time. So I'll be brief now, and I will simply say that in almost every field, architecture, music, food, something which we should not be proud of, but I have seen those recipes which I collected from Andalusia, written in those days, where even they mention what drink will go with what food. Red wine with this, white wine with that. That is something still observed by Europeans. In terms of dress, in terms of almost everything, you see, one should not be surprised. We were dominated by Western powers, Muslim world. See how much impact they have left. The language that I'm communicating with is a legacy of that colonial rule. The dress that we wear is a legacy of that. Some of our breakfast materials that we eat, some of the food that we eat is their legacy. Multiply that many times, and you will see that these were some of the legacies that Muslim Spain left for Europe.
Hello.
Yeah.
Can you hear me, sir? Yeah.
Yes, no, I can hear you.
All right, sir. Sorry for interruption, sir. Actually, sir, I want to know that keeping all these contributions in mind, what were the reasons that Muslims were kicked out of Europe in such a way that they never could go there to rule or to establish their governance? I mean, what were the factors after all? Why the Muslims were kicked in such a way out from Europe? And that is a big question, sir.
Yeah, that's a big question, Mark. Actually, there were two issues you have to keep in mind. I don't know how many of us know through our history or historiography that there was this amazing rapprochement between Charlemagne and Abbasid, especially Harun al-Rashid. Harun al-Rashid did not like two areas. He did not like Byzantium. He did not like Umayyads in Spain. And amazingly, Charlemagne had the same problem. He did not like Umayyads in Spain. He did not like Byzantines in Constantinople. So, this is what happened. Harun told him that I will take care of your Constantinople problem and you take care of our problem in Spain. Their relationship became so good that he even sent his masons to his favorite city. In German, it's called Aachen. In French, it's called Aix-la-Chapelle, to build a church which looks exactly like a mosque built on Eastern style, or to be exact on the style in which we have seen things in Baghdad. This is one factor. Muslims versus Muslims, or Muslim rapprochement with Christians. Similarly, when they came to know in Spain that this is what is going on, they also had pacts with local Christian rulers. Secondly, Muslims were always in a minority. Always. In these areas. They were never in a majority because they did not impose their religion upon other people. Third thing, in-house problems. Problems between Umayyads, or let me put it very succinctly, between Arabs and non-Arabs. These last two dynasties that we know as Al-Muravids and Al-Muhudds, they were not Arabs, they were Berbers. And even they had their own tribal instincts. One belonged to the Atlas mountain area, the other belonged to the desert. So one pitching against the other, uncles pitching against nephews, nephews conspiring to do something against even their own families, members of their own society. That's why this is called Taifa. Taifa literally means is a small group of people who want to rule over their own respective areas. And for that, they would take help from anybody. Even if a Christian fanatic would help them, they would take their help. And that led to Muslim downfall, because Christians were united in one thing, that they have occupied our territory. They, as I told you, this was amazing conflict, amazing paradigm which we have to struggle and figure out. And figuring out is like this. We like what you have done to us, developing our shipping industry. If you look at Ferdinand Brodel's books on the Mediterranean, he will say that essentially Muslim Spain was responsible for most of the discoveries that Europeans made throughout the world. This is what we call Annales School of Historiography in France. But Spanish had this problem. They still have this problem. How to adjust to this? The best part of Spain is that part from 711 to 1030. Before that, nobody knew what was going on, or was there anything credible in Spain. After that, terrible, whether it's Philip II or Charles V or whosoever followed after this. They did not have a good reputation, even in their own countries. So, this is the epidemic, or this is the problem, that when it comes to oust the Muslims, Christians come together. When it is for the Muslims to resist that, we see very few people coming to the help of Muslims. When this was going on in Spain, did anybody come to the rescue of these Muslims? No. They were given three choices. One, get out of here. They even asked them to take their dead bodies, those who were buried. I have seen those places with empty graves. They told them that, we don't want to keep any of you here. Take them. Even your dead bodies, take them with you. Leave this country and you are safe. Or convert to Christianity and you are safe. Or face death. It's very difficult to migrate. Many of the people, now these are some of the sinister things that we see in European history, but they are true. Some of them stayed, but the Christians thought that secretly they were Muslims. So the royal edict was that those who take morning showers are Muslims. It was forbidden to take hot bath in the morning. It was forbidden to grow a beard like Muslim style. There was a tax on that. And there are so many other things that how do you say that this man has really not converted to Christianity? If you go to some of the museums and see those paintings, and you will see this is Europe. These are human beings. This is what is happening. Women forcibly are being converted. And then they were spied on. So it's not a very positive picture of Europe at that time. But that's how it happened. One mayor of this part, which is called Andalusia, I don't know if you know the background. Why is it called Andalusia? There was a group of people called Vandals, and they were not considered good. So this area was called Vandalicia because that's how this area was conquered by them. And through different uses, corruption, that Vandalicia becomes Andalusia. Otherwise, it has no Arabic or any other origin. However, Cordoba is Qaryat Tayyiba, which is a beautiful park, a pure city, or like any other city, which later on became Cordoba. Similarly, Seville, all these have different names in that part of the world. So that is one reason. And if you visit South Spain, go to different villages. One man who wanted to remember the history, he put plaques on different houses. This house belonged to the Muslims who used to do these things. Then he has shown if they were cultivators, if they were weavers, or any other skill. So many villages you will see that from where they were evicted. So the easiest way was for them to go to North Africa, and most of them came back to North Africa. Others converted to Christianity. Some apparently did not convert, but second generation, third generation, they converted to Christianity. And others were killed. The other thing that you will see in Spain is that they have marked all those places. Especially, the last SAJID of Moor. There is a big monument there. Apparently, the last ruler of Andalusia looked back at his castle from that point and shed tears when his mother scolded him. So they have erected a monument, and all those hotels and places near that place they called Suspiro del Moor, last sigh of Muslims. So they are quite good in preserving all those points as well as the points of a high culture that they produced. So this is one of the reasons, partly because they themselves were never united, and partly because nobody came to their help. Thirdly, almost all Europe was united that let's get these Muslims out of Europe.
Thank you, sir. As you made mention of Cordoba, sir, before going to the Emirate of Cordoba or Caliphate of Cordoba, I would like to take up this question posed by Sajid Khan Gori. So, the question is also appearing on the screen, that what are the main political, religious, and social reasons that age of discoveries and scientific development not stopped in Muslim world like in Europe in this era of medieval history? Yes.
Well, depends how you define the age of discovery and scientific development. If you want to see age of discovery, that you go and discover new cultures, Muslims did that. They wrote about it. I mean, the idea of writing universal histories about those people, about those areas where Muslims did not exist, that itself shows that they were eager to discover and know the rest of the world. Now, in terms of scientific development, yes, they did. My God, what we do not understand is that this scientific development that they did, had it been not of any use, Europe would have discarded everything that Muslims left in Europe. They did not discard their books. Some of their books became textbooks, not for 100 years, 2 years, for centuries. They were textbooks. Many of their books, many of their things, if we start reading those and start looking at them, one thing was that they Latinized Muslim names. So even we do not know who is Averroes, who is Avicenna. We don't know that. And when we start looking at that, we will realize that yes, all these, who is Evan Page, Ibn Majah, I mean, they change the names to the extent that they do not even sound Arabic or Muslim. So there was scientific development. Even in India, Irfan Habib has written a very good article on how much scientific development and discovery was undertaken by Muslims, especially by Mughals and Turks in India. It has happened everywhere. I mean, we can look at even the area in which we live today. Al-Biruni's discoveries, others so many, Ibn al-Hashim's. So yes, there was. But if you are talking about establishing institutions and universities, even we had those also. Since we were occupied by the West, educated by the West, we were told that universities, scientific development, medical development, everything started from Europe or from the Western world. Yeah, and we accepted that. But go back then and see from where they got all these things. So that phase of our history actually needs to be reconstructed. Ask them. We will, I think, have perhaps a separate session on Fatimid Caliphate. How the universities function today, starting from professors' gowns to library holdings, to photocopying, to taking out books from the library. Where did it start? You see, I think in one of my lectures, I gave the example of deep impact of colonialism on human mind. Yes, in that sense in which we understand scientific development today, in that sense, yeah, we didn't do anything. But if you start pointing out from field work to writing books, to discussing them with students, to going to the field, all these things you will see, even in, as I said, even in literature. Some of the finest pieces of literature that later on Europe produced, they took inspiration from these earlier Muslim periods. So just keep in mind, yes, a Renaissance, number one, happened in what we call medieval history. That is the designation that I don't like. It was as modern. Can you call the administration of Spain, the development of knowledge, arts, and religious tolerance in Spain as medieval? Would you like to call it medieval? Then what is modern? It is as modern as one could imagine. But since phase of history has been labeled as medieval, so we just put it in that quote-unquote garbage of medievalism. Nothing to be proud about, nothing to be modern about. No, that's how history is defaced, reconstructed, and revised. For them, modern starts when Europe begins to bloom, when Europe begins to blossom in terms of ideas, in terms of freedom from religious fiefdoms, and in terms of these landlords. If we reconstruct our own history, our modernism will start much earlier. Our Charter of Human Freedom will start much earlier. This is the idea in my mind when I give these lectures. Reconstruct, have your own methodology of writing history, and start tracing these modern ideas of human rights, of human charter. Magna Carta, people talk a lot about. That's from where everything nice started. Yeah, because we don't know the Charter of Medina. We don't know the last sermon of the Prophet of Islam, the last address that he gave before he left this world. We don't know that. Why can't we reconstruct all these ideas from our own history and then see which is modern and which is medieval?
Sure. So there are a number of questions by the participants, but before that, may not miss that aspect of Cordoba. So, how do you see these two terms, Emirate of Cordoba and then Caliphate of Cordoba? What was the difference, and what was the nature, sir?
Yes, Emirate of Cordoba was,
sir,
even though Umayyad Empire in Damascus had ended, but with the hope that perhaps I will be accepted by Baghdad, I will be accepted by the Abbasids as a governor of an outlying distant province. Abdurrahman did not call himself as caliph. We don't have much evidence, but it seems that many of the people prevailed upon him that caliphate has religious overtones. And if we give this impression to the world that right now you have two religiously endowed institutions, it will not be good for. This is my projection of what he did. I have not seen any reference anywhere, I'll be honest with you. But religious designation of caliphate was considered one Muslim ummah, one Muslim community with different outlying areas, like the same thing like Sultan. Sultans were not independent. Khalifa, they were under Khalifa, whether they sought his approval or not, that's a different thing. So much so that even Akbar, who called himself as Shahanshah, he used to send gifts and sought approval from the Ottoman caliphs at that time. So there was this amazing discrepancy between those Muslim areas which were purely independent, never consulted the center about anything, yet did not venture to call themselves as independent or as caliph. Now, going to the next question. Why did then they, after 50 years, 60 years, started calling themselves caliph when they came to know that the Caliphate of Baghdad was conspiring against them by colluding with their enemies in Europe, by helping Charlemagne, whom they had defeated? So that's when they said that, no, we should also seek religious sanction. And we are the ones who are representing Muslim world and not these people who are sitting in Baghdad.
Sir, now I take the question of Najib Ahmed, sir. He asks, sir, that how should we take the achievements of Muslim rule in Spain in the present Muslim world scenario?
Well, we should look at it, we should make a paradigm. Are we intolerant? If we are, then we should disown our heritage of Spain. Are we open to new ideas? Do we have intellectual discussions with other religious figures? Like, for example, if you visit Cordoba, the thing in which they take, the people of Cordoba, they take pride is the fact that they will show you how discussions used to take place between Christians, Jews, and Muslims on the basis of purely mutual respect and understanding. Are we doing that? Are we living that life of clean air management? Are we using innovative ideas in developing techniques? Are we doing all those things? Are we looking at human body, human intellect with the same way that they did? If we are, then indeed we should be proud that yes, we are following those legacies. You see, I don't divide contribution of history to different ethnic groups or religious groups. No, it's human history. It's world history in which all of us have contributed. Even those whom we call pagans, whom we call non-believers, or communists, or anybody, if they have contributed something good to the world, we should acknowledge it and accept it. And I think this is the legacy of Muslim Spain, that they accepted that. If you look at some of the best achievements that Muslims have had, you will see them outside of Arab world. Architecture and culture of Spain, architecture and culture of Muslim India, architecture and culture of Iran, architecture and culture of Central Asia. The only exception you could say is, what about Damascus? Well, that was also Roman. Don't forget that. So we have to admire that whenever Muslims came in contact with another culture, this beautiful, fine synthesis emerges. I'm not going to go to the extent of what Ibn Khaldun says, that wherever the Arabs went, they destroyed the civilization. I don't agree with that. No, that's not true. They absorbed a lot from that culture, and the synthesis always proved to be beautiful and everlasting. If we are doing that, if we are learning from our own mistakes and if we are learning from contribution of others, then indeed we are honoring our past, especially of Muslim Spain. If not, then we should forget it.
Thank you very much. In the remaining 5 minutes, sir, we will be taking two questions. One, that having all this universal experience of governance there in Arab, then in Europe, then in Africa, I mean, how would you summarize this whole experience of Umayyad's rule? And then there is another question by Iram Gul. She wants to know that. She asked that there was a flourishing age of discoveries and scientific developments, as you told, but this terminated. Whether there was inner strife or reasons from outside of the Muslim societies.
Let me answer this question first, because this is a very important question. We always blame the outsiders for creating problems. Either they are conspiring against us, yes, or they are thinking that, oh my God, let's stop the Muslims from doing something nice. And if you don't stop them, and the best way to stop is to intrigue or to do something against. No, that's not true. It's our own fault. What we did was, we disowned these people who somehow or the other were disowned by certain religious authorities. We did not understand that. I remember once I gave a lecture on Ibn Rushd, and I was told that he was not even a Muslim, that he propagated ideas which were against Islam. And when I asked, could you give me the example of what he wrote against Ghazali. So I said, what, Ghazali is the prophet? He wrote against the Hufatul Philosopher, which Ghazali had written as condemnation of the philosophers. And he wrote the Hufatul Tahufat, which means condemnation of the condemnation. So we follow one group, then we disown the other group. This has been the main problem of Muslims. If you are a Hanafi, you don't give a damn to the others. How much Shafi'i, Hanbali, or Maliki have contributed. If you are a Shia, you don't give a damn to what Sunnis have contributed. These are the ways in which we behave. Similarly, when we look back at our history, the people we admire are not those people who contributed something positive. We admire those who destroyed other cultures or other. Sultan Mahmud Ghaznavi, we admire. Why? What was his contribution? I don't want to go into details because you don't have time. We admire Aurangzeb. Why? Because he killed 3 of his brothers, imprisoned his father and his sister? No, because he was a good Muslim. He prayed 5 times a day. What did he contribute to the Muslim world, to the Muslim empire, to the Muslim psyche in South Asia? These are some of the questions which we need to understand. Then, if you are satisfied that you have analyzed our own inner problems, our own inner conflicts, then you can go and say, yes, now we can raise a finger and say that that particular society, that particular group conspired against Muslims. No. We should first analyze our own way of thinking and understanding history and historiography.
Thank you very much, sir, for such an enlightening discussion, and thanks to all the participants who were participating. With this commitment that, okay, next session we will be having on Abbasides, and here is another question by Dr. Rabia. Let's take that very briefly. And she asks, an honor and pleasure to be part of this. I look forward to it. This is just a comment, sir. A comment. Okay. Next session, sir, we will be having on, besides that, there's another demand. One that we should switch back to Urdu.
Okay.
Most of the participants asked, and secondly, sir, this program, as Quaid-i-Azam University has also started a FM radio station, and they also want to broadcast this discussion on their radio. And it was their demand also that better it should be in Urdu so that most of the people may enjoy it. Let's see, sir, what way we opt for. However, thanks to all the participants, and especially, sir, to you for sparing your valuable time and enlightening us on such important issues in such a fantastic way. It's really a treat, sir. Thank you very much. And we will reassemble next Saturday at 6 p.m. Take care of yourself and keep pursuing the pursuit of knowledge. God bless you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and my greetings and love to all of you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Goodbye, sir.
Bye.